Peace, peace. Welcome everyone to another segment of Foundational Friday on Enlightenment and Transformation. I want to welcome all of you who are listening right now live via YouTube, as well as those of you who will come back later and hear this much later. I am Chief Yuya, Chief Jugna of the Anu Spiritual Order and Head Instructor of the Sadula House Spiritual Center. And you are listening to Foundational Friday on this wonderful Friday on the Enlightenment and Transformation Network. And I want to thank all of you who have decided to share this time with me this evening and the Enlightenment and Transformation family. And of course, always those of you who get a lot out of this experience. I'm happy for you. You know, we still get a lot of good feedback, you know, in terms of people needing certain medicine at certain times. And if you had an opportunity to check out last night's Thunderground Thursday, then you'll know that that's exactly what we were talking about. Medicine, meditation, medicus, mediri. But in any event, this evening, as I shared with you guys, I think last strong, there was a whole series that I was going to do on different offshoots of the Yoruba tradition, Lukumi being one, Santeria being another one, Kendomble being another one, even Shango. But I took kind of a turn, as I expressed and kind of shared my reasons for that. And still keeping with that, we're gonna cover some other stuff first. You know, we're not gonna. Like I said, we got time. I'll be doing this for a little bit longer. I'll be doing it for a little bit longer. So we have time to come back to certain things, and there's so much to cover. So much to cover. I mean, a lot of times I talk to people who think that, or at least profess that, they've pretty much reached the end of their line in terms of the things that they know or could know, or when you speak to them, they don't, you know, everything you say, oh yeah, I already knew that. Yeah, I figured that. I was feeling that. And there's so much that's there to be open to us. And, you know, tonight's discussion, we were going to talk about Santeria, but I'm gonna speak about it from a certain angle. I don't really want to speak directly about the Santeria tradition. We'll come back to that, like I said, like the other items we were working on. But I really want to speak to some other stuff as it pertains to our knowings, you know, and our uncoverings of the mysteries. Oh, and you know, if anybody wants to ask a question or comment or whatever, you can. Right now, I'm broadcasting through a Hangout, so all you have to do is click on the bottom of the screen. I think it's the lower left. It says something like "participate in the conversation," something like that, and you just click that, and then you can ask a question, and then I'll see it. It'll pop up on my screen, and I can answer it. For right now, that's better for me. You know, I know a lot of times I take calls and stuff, and I'll get back to the taking calls again, but I really want to set it up a little bit differently because sometimes the calls become a bit wasteful. You know, people asking questions that are not real questions, but really just to make maybe a statement of defiance based on what it is that they're hearing, as opposed to just saying, you know, I don't agree. You know, or sometimes individuals don't have the talent and the gift of situational awareness. And in situational contextual awareness, sometimes they're not aware of what to say when, you know, again, like I spoke about, there's a time and place for everything. So sometimes they don't realize that when they call in with a question or whatever, the question shouldn't be 15 minutes, you know, because there's other people waiting and stuff like that. So I said, you know, for right now, let me just kind of focus on some of the ideas that need to be put across. And if someone has a question, you know, it would be better if they just typed it up, you know, and put it in. And, you know, and there's other ways to participate too. You can also comment on the videos. I see that as I'm working, I can see the comments, or as I'm speaking and I can respond to them right then and there. But yeah, so there's a space that I want to take us into in regards to the topic, Santeria. And of course, when you're dealing with Santeria, you're dealing with saints. A lot of people immediately associate Santeria with Orisha worship. Not totally accurate, but we'll get into some of that as we move through it. The first thing we want to do is we want to not only understand the roots of things, but we want to understand the thinking that goes into certain things that we do. So let's think about something. Let's look at the idea of a saint for a moment. And really, I want to look at two ideas associated with this whole thing. I'm going to look at the idea of a saint, and I would also like to explore with you all the idea of a God, because obviously, they're obviously closely connected. You can't really have one without the other. In some senses, you can't have one without the other. So we know when we're dealing with the concept and the idea of a saint, we're dealing with someone who's been revered based on their commitment and their devotion to a particular path, a particular way of life. And that commitment and that devotion has been so steadfast and unwavering that they're considered to be amongst the holy ones. Okay. A saint is a holy person. So you don't actually have to be dead to be a saint. A lot of people think that they think saints are just, old people that someone has then later venerated, and or ancestors have been venerated. But you can be alive, and there are living saints, But someone who is really tapped into a certain path, and that path and that consistency that they have is considered to be something that will transcend with them when they go into the next space of their existence. That is a saint. And if you think about it, many of us who are practicing indigenous spirituality and different forms of spirituality, where we are focused and concentrated not only on an earthly matrix, but we're also concentrated on an afterlife matrix. One of the movements, or the main movements and desires that we're moving towards, is to maintain our conscious virtue through lifetimes. Having an exceptional awareness and lucidity as it relates to moving and navigating different realms, going beyond world and going into different realms. Just like when you dream and you astral travel, a lot of times, it becomes a lot more exciting when it's lucid and you realize, wow, actually, I'm aware that I'm dreaming, and I can now explore this world that I'm in with my functioning mind to a degree, right? Because it is still a different mind. It's, so that's one of the desires and the goals that some people have when doing that. And, to be a saint, you don't have to be a martyr, and you don't have to be a pauper. You don't have to be financially disadvantaged. You don't have to be at a financial space where you open all of your coffers and give everything away in order to achieve sainthood. I mean, even for those of you who are attached to the Christian paradigm, which so many of you are, mainly because of the intrusion of Christianity in so many ancient works. So that stamp is on everything that we touch, ingenious idea. But anyway, many of you who are associated with that paradigm, you always have to remember that even the Messiah of your tradition, of your book, had a treasurer, right? Judas was the treasurer. So even though we picture somebody walking around barefoot all around the world and like not eating, just giving away and eating, nibbling on pieces of bread and half a fish or something. You got to have money to have a treasurer. You know, just something to think about. You know, so yeah, the idea of saint, and of course I'm tapping into the saint because we're talking about Santeria, which is the acknowledgement and the veneration of sainthood, or those who are called saints. Now, many people, again, when they think about Santeria, they immediately remove the saint out of it, and they go straight to Orisha. And some people are kind of taken aback at times when they realize that the saint aspect is there, and then some people are taken back when they realize the Orisha aspect is there. I've seen both sides of that before, where people were unable to get comfortable with either one. And you know, it's just African stuff, you know, all of it really, because you got to remember that every system, and any system that you may be dealing with, it has its roots in older, higher ascended beings. And I'm talking about beings that walk the planet like you and I, those special ones. And what happens is that they've come to a state and a recognizing of their own state of isness, you know, which takes us closer to the essence of things. Okay, so they recognize and they tap into their essence. You know, they've actualized that there is an essence, and they're functioning with the sense of isness. And then when their wisdom hits the light of day, it goes from isness to existence. You see, so the duality, or the complementary experience of one's essence and one's existence are really where we get the greatest wisdoms. You know, because wisdom lives in there. You know, is really where we get the greatest wisdoms that come forth. Right? Because the wisdom is always based on that essence once it hits the light of day, and we observe it, and we say that's what that is. You know, that's when you start going into whatness. All right. Maybe we'll do a show on that another time. You know, we'll get into more the theological philosophies of essence and existence. But anyway, so you typically have these source spaces, and then those source spaces have offshoots. They have rays that go out, and those different rays that go out become the different religious doctrine. You see, but one of the things that we want to recognize is that those different religious doctrines come from a common root. They always do. That's why when you start studying them, you'll see these ancient symbols in all of them. You'll find crosses. You'll find what we know to be as, you know, swastikas. You'll find ankhs. You'll find, of course, a lot of phallic symbols. You can't get away from the phallic symbols, good old phallic symbols. You know, but you'll find all of these sacred and holy symbols in each tradition. And at some point, you have to realize that that's because each tradition is a complex and sophisticated mask of the original one. You see, it's a complex mask, and those masks are pulled off and veiled, or sometimes even created by those who we consider to be saints. Okay, those who we consider to be saints. And you know, the idea, even the term saint, is actually an indigenous term, believe it or not. Your saints would be like your Babalawos. They would be like your Iyanifas, your Sangomas, you know, because to be a saint, it really connects itself with the idea of holy, to be holy, or to become holy, right? And in root, saint comes from sanctus, all right? And basically being holy, holiness is a process of, you know, a lot of times we look at holy, we say, okay, holy is pure, but it's not really that. Holiness is being put aside for a specific purpose. A holiness is like a sacrifice. That's why, a lot of times we relate the terms holy and sacred together, because sacred, sacrifice, same word. Okay. So when one is tapping into a vibration of holiness, they're tapping into a vibration of sanctification. When one is sanctified, you put it to the side for something. You set it apart. Like sometimes you may do that with your own children, or you say, no, I don't want you playing with those children. I have something that I want you to do. I have a greater purpose and mission for you. So you set them apart. Okay. So that you basically, you sanctify them. You make them saints. Doesn't mean that there's a perfection. That means that there's a consistent conviction and commitment to the principles and the tradition that they say that they're about. That's why a lot of times you may have people like me who are always pushing the thresholds of tradition. And though I may honor it, I speak about a lot of traditional things, but you can obviously clearly see that I'm always trying to push that next level of extraordinary in myself, and the next level of extraordinary in all of the people who I work with. So in order to do that, a lot of times I have to step out of sainthood. I have to step out of the dedication and the commitment to one way of doing things and make mistakes in new ways of doing things. You see, I remember there was a time, just to give you guys kind of an idea, not long ago, where someone told me that I should not do any type of broadcasts or radio shows. And he said, because of the type of the level of teaching that I do, and for the level that I'm at in terms of my own initiations, he said that it's actually a disrespect to the tradition, and that I could teach the exact same things, but only if a person is on my mat. Now, what that means on my mat, when we divine, we usually have a wood mat that we sit on, and there's a science behind that too, but you don't even know that. So if someone's sitting in front of me on my mat, then yeah, I can go in. But if they're not, then I shouldn't be speaking about those things. Now, you hold that up to the amount of change and growth and progression that maybe some of you, not all of you, have been able to experience in your life. And think about if I would have adhered to that. You see? So you kind of like moving in slow motion. You got to wait till you find me, or wait till you find somebody like me, as opposed to looking at what's here, looking at the envelopes that have been pushed and riding the wave of that instead of being swept under. And it's not to say those who hold the vanguard don't have their value, because they do. Why? Because they're the ones who maintain the sainthood. They maintain the sanctification and the set apart aspect of it. They may not be people like me who will go out into the world and teach. They may be people who stay within the temple. And on some levels, that maintains the purity of what you may consider to be the tradition of that thing. But going back to this idea of, again, everything coming from a similar or common space, or many things. I'm not going to say every tradition, because some stuff is just foolishness. I may not say that to a person, but trust me, I'm thinking it. Some stuff people come up with, they just, they start to really bask in the glory of their own imagination, and like, what else can I come up with? And then once they start seeing that people are listening to them, it really gets like, kind of ridiculous. So, yeah, so the idea of, you want to look at it like these traditions and these ascended masters as being almost like the sun, and or like the original light prism that creates a rainbow. So you have the sun, and you have several rays of that sun, right? Sometimes 7, right? When we talk about siete rayos. So the different rays of that sun, or the different angles, some may call them angels, but the different angles and the different rays now give you a different veiled experience of that original truth. And it may just be a profound sentence, and that profound sentence which is usually the masking that you call religion. Religion is usually very profound. That's why when you read religious scripture, it's very poetic. And the reason that it's created in such a poetic and profound form, so that it can tap into even the most simplest of minds. That's why, if you put things, believe it or not, if you put things just straight and very plain, people don't understand it. But when you make it more poetic and lyrical, a simple mind can attach to it quicker. Believe it or not. And you see it all the time. Sometimes I'm talking to someone, you listen to the shows, and I'll say, okay, you got to do this. And they'll say, yeah, but no, because, I did this and that. They're just not listening. Now, if I give a long story, or if I give a bunch of Yoruba words and add it in with some other esoteric ancient stuff and make it sound poetic, then they start writing down what I'm saying. And they latch onto it. See? So the simplification of things is actually for the higher level masters. That's why when you find people who have ascended, those higher level initiates, their conversation amongst one another seems very simple and base, because they don't need all of the covering and all of the complex sentences in order to lead them back to that source ray. They're already there at the source ray. And the further away you get from that source, the more complex the information becomes. That's why, like they say, it's a simple truth, right? So when we look at this idea of saints, we're looking at individuals who understood, we're looking at initiates who understood the true simplicity. They worked their way through the complex systems. Now, I know the average person listening may say, well, that's what I'm saying. All of this is just simple. People who talk like that don't understand anything. I've even gotten to a point in my life where I'm just almost tired of hearing them. I'm just, tired. After a while, it gets a little annoying. When you listening to people all the time who are disregarding and disrespecting the work that has gone into to unveil the mysteries of certain systems. And they discredit all of that work with simple sentences, like, well, yeah, I read this, I read that. And it was basically saying this. Anytime you hear somebody say that, they don't understand, because you're looking, you see no change at all in their lives, no change in their work. Nothing changes with them, so just trust and understand what I'm saying when I'm speaking about the idea of the initiate. I'm speaking about the idea of the master. I'm not purposely oversimplifying it. I'm speaking about those who had the ability to cut through. It takes a certain type of eye to do that. It's almost like a boxer. When you have a flurry of punches coming at you, how do you see that line towards the target? Not everyone has that capability to be able to see that line, like right to somebody's chin. Or a line right to somebody's solar plex while all of that action is going on. You see that with athletes a lot, as well as with singers. How do you know which note to hit? You're looking at the crowd, everyone's screaming, lights are going off. What song do you know to start off with? There's a genius in that. To not waste movements. Luther Vandross was a master at that. Master. I've actually never really seen anyone as adept at that, other than him, with the exception of maybe Marcus Miller, who worked with him. That was one of his producers. But he had the uncanny ability to use his tones efficiently. He didn't waste anything. And he knew the exact notes to hit with the exact inflections and tonations to create an immediate mood. You see? That's an ascended master, or an ascended initiate, as I like to. I prefer to use the term initiate. You guys have probably noticed I don't say the term master much. Like, people say, "Oh, you're a master teacher." No, I don't think so. I don't want to be a master teacher, because then what am I gonna do after that? There's not that much exciting stuff in life to me. I don't find it, all that interesting. There's a few highs that I got left because I've done so many things already. So don't take that from me. You're a master teacher, Chief. No, don't do that to me. I still consider myself a student, and I enjoy being a student. I enjoy the exploration. But anyway, so again, coming back to this idea of the saint, right? Again, dealing with Santeria and understanding that, of course, many of these traditions came out of a common theological theme and a common divine scheme. You'll find that many of them, like mainly your big three, are mainly based around astrology. You're just dealing with zodiacal signs and sun worship, and so many of them. You'll even throw the word sun in them. Holy, Helios, Sunni, sun, Torah. Like the sun is all over it. You start to realize that, hey, we're just talking about astrology here, and you just put a bunch of complicated sentences on top of astrology. So understanding that so many things come from that root, we start to understand that means the idea of the saint is not, though it may be a term that was mainly used but not necessarily originated in Christian form, because it's actually an indigenous term. Sanctus, which is Latin, was used amongst pagans and indigenous people, quote unquote pagans. You know what that means? Pagan is really just somebody who lives in the country outside of the cities, but don't worry about all that. But it was mainly used by non-Christians. Sanctus. Again, your holy man, your shaman, I guess like you guys would call, maybe some of you would say like a witch doctor. Your spiritual advisors, those who have committed themselves to this way, to this doctrine, become the saints. Now, you may think that's the coolest thing, right? To be called a saint or to become a saint, but not really. Because remember, it's a as above, so below, as below, so above type of thing. So when you move into that space of sainthood, where you say, I'm shifting all of my human fancies and desires into this one space, and this is what I'm going to be, and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to remove the trappings of old ideas, materialism, and kind of build the foundations of my life on certain eternal truths that I consider to be my personal dogma. Then you create that idea or that body, that energy body of yourself in the heavenly realms as well as the earthly realm. So then when you die, what happens? They say, well, this person's a saint. Go pray to Saint so-and-so. You still get pulled on the same way as when you're on earth. And in many senses, you get trapped into that form. Like, that's what a zombie is. You hear me sometimes, once in a while, I'll mention like these little zombie movies and stuff, like Walking Dead, and I guess the new one, Fear the Walking. I mean, there's a bunch of them. Dead Set, Dead Zone is another one. But, the zombie thing is big right now. And really what that's dealing with is a person who has locked themselves into a certain cycle of activity. So you'll find that when people become zombies, what do they want to do? They walk around listlessly and they just want to eat, because it represents the consumerism that the average, not just American, but Westerner dives into. It's just all about consumerism. So when they die, they just want to keep consuming. As above, so below. As below, so above. So the idea of a God, because a lot of times, sometimes people don't realize that gods are trapped. And it's all in what your perception of what a god is, which is a very subjective term. Someone asked me that last night. I was out and they said, got into that same ridiculous. So what do you believe in? Here we go. I don't believe in anything. You don't believe in a higher power? I mean, something that's higher than yourself? And I was like, well, what would I need to believe in that? Like, why do I have to believe in that? Like, why do I have to believe anything? Why don't I just know something or don't know it? And then they were like, what about faith? And I was like, faith is, you don't even understand what faith is, because you got that definition out of the Bible. We dealt with, in ancient times, you had pistis and you had Sophia, or some said Sophia, where you get the Sophos. Pistis or Pistius dealt with knowledge, which many people wrongly translated as faith, but it's actually knowledge. And Sophia or Sophia, Sophos, is wisdom, knowledge and wisdom, male and female, Osir and Osset, sun and moon. You see, it's all astrology. When you break it down, you're really just dealing with, the eternal planets, as they call them sometimes, sun and the moon. But so I said, why do I have to do that? Why do I have to acknowledge something greater than myself? Like, where does that idea come from? And obviously, I mean, I could have answered the questions more simply, but sometimes you just you want to shut the questions down. You want to make sure whenever you see the person again, they never ask you again. Because they'll say, "Oh, you're just so difficult." Yeah, good. So then stop asking me stuff like that. And they're like, "Well, what about God? Do you believe in God?" I just told you I don't believe in anything. And I bet you can't refer to God without saying the word believe, which should tell you something. You see? So the idea of a God is so subjective a lot of times when we use it, because it doesn't sometimes call for deeper understanding of what that is. But I'm going to tell you, a lot of times what people consider to be their gods, they don't realize are just saints. And some, you're dealing with Catholicism, people will pray to the saints. Or Santeria, you'll work with the saints. Even in the Orisha tradition, people will call the Orisha gods, but that's not what they really are. You've made them, because we're always so quick to make the immaterial material, not realizing that even the planet itself moves from a state of solid to gas constantly. I mean, you have mineral and plant life, even animal life, that's always looking and aiming to turn into vapor life, coming up from the earth into the sky, expanding itself. But we always want to bring stuff from the sky down to the earth and make it solid. It's almost like with children. We got to have a child. We got to create something physically so that way we can see what the two of us are together. Some people get stuck in that. But anyway, so dealing with the idea of the creation of it, I was thinking about something in terms of Santeria, and I was thinking about some of the Vedic scriptures. Even when you deal with the Book of the Dead, but where it talks about people becoming gods, people obtaining immortality. And if you talk to a lot of people who deal with Orisha, they tell you the same thing. Oh, well, the Orisha are ancestors who once walked the earth, but they were so good that they became Orisha. Right. And the saints, the same thing. Right. So they took the same model. Saint Patrick, Saint Augustine, Saint Thomas, Patrick coming from Peter, coming from Ptah. So Saint Patrick is really Saint Ptah. But anyway, so many people take that path and they say, okay, when we're dealing with these saints, or they call them the gods, at one point they were human. They have that idea. So many people who get into, try to go beyond the common understandings of life, they want to intertwine their energy with what they consider to be their gods. And there are certain initiate rituals in certain traditions, even when you look at the act of communion, drinking the blood of Christ and eating the piece of bread or the wafer they give you. Like you said, this is blood of my blood, flesh of my flesh. Do this in remembrance of me. So, and they say, well, why do you take communion? Because that's when I become one with God. It was cannibalism. But, so it's like drinking the blood of the gods will connect you with the gods. Well, I mean, that's an old rite. But in many senses, what was done was that people would offer their own blood to the gods. They would make a primordial sacrifice of their own blood to the god in order to interweave and intertwine their lives with them. Now, you find that in Tibetan culture. The Brahmins used to write about that. You have Kemetic rituals that outline that. People have turned Orisha into that, but people do a lot of stuff. The Greeks did it, of course, because they basically That, talk about one of the rays of light. They basically just took everybody's stuff and just, snap, put a G sticker on it. The Greeks did it. But this idea, you even see in the Book of the Dead where it says that he became one with the gods through an interflow of common life and the common blood of the two. So you take your common life, you interflow it with the blood of the gods, and you become that. You see, in Vedic scriptures, you have the Lord creatures offer themselves as a sacrifice for the gods. Saying that like man is the Lord of creatures, like we're the lords, really calling us that set energy. We're the lords of materialism, sacrificing ourselves for those who we know to be the gods. And then it says that in knowing this, what is it? Knowing this sacrifice, the Purusha Medha, or the sacrifice of that which is primeval, the primordial primeval man, he becomes everything. So it's saying by sacrificing yourself for the gods, the primeval man, meaning like the base qualities of who and what you are, become everything. Well, what are they saying when they say become everything? That means becomes God, because God is everything. You become the omnipresent force by sacrificing yourself to the omnipresent force. Well, this is saint. This is how one becomes a saint. Even when you have people who, you have certain religions where a man or a woman dedicates their sexuality to their God. You see, in a dedication of that sexuality brings them closer to that God. You see, and that's how they're striving and looking to achieve sainthood. They've sacrificed their regenerative capabilities. Well, at least that's what they tell us. Because, a lot of this stuff is, when it comes to religion, you got to realize a lot of religions are based on taking an oath and then doing whatever you feel like doing in the world. And that's completely acceptable. You come here and you accept this individual or this individual, this belief into yourself. And once you accept the belief, we're good. You can go on. You can go now. Next. And then you can kind of go out into the world to do whatever you want, but at least now you can always use that banner, especially if you want to go do something wrong. You go do that banner. You use that banner, But again, you have in so many ancient scriptures. I just gave an example, like out of the Vedic scriptures, but there's a lot where it speaks about the sacrifice of man to become one with everything. So when we think about sainthood, or many of you who are striving to be those shamans, you have to kind of sometimes look and say, okay, am I binding the aspects, the earthly aspects and the immaterial aspects of me, sacrificing in some senses my mortal blood in order to obtain heaven? Am I doing that completely, or am I taking secret vows in order just to get a name for something and then going out into the world and doing something else? Sometimes you see some very weird contradictions amongst the spiritual people. And sometimes it's so contradictory that we start to think that maybe that is what the spirituality is supposed to look like. So it calls us, hopefully, to sometimes look at our habits and those things that we're establishing as our common traditions, and analyzing and critically criticizing the superficial aspects of what we are and what we're dealing with in order to tap into a more divine devotion. And it's not for everyone. You've heard me say that so many times. This way of life, at this level, at the level of the higher initiate, is not for everyone. Everyone's not trying to become a saint. They may say they want to become a saint. They may put on all of the regalia of such, but you can put the symbols on all day. But at some point, if you've not touched the root of a thing, people will know. And that's the same issue that many of you have with religion. It's full of dogma. It's full of rules. It's full of symbolism, but you don't feel that interflow with the divine source inside of those buildings or inside of those people. You realize that they're just wearing costumes. And in truth, all they really are materialist. That's really the religion, materialism. They're materialist. You see. So you kind of want to give some thought to that. You know, when you're looking and you're aiming or you're professing that you're aiming towards some level of sainthood, we'll call it, you know, because moving into that space of a shaman or moving into that space of a spiritual advisor or whatever requires that same sensual worship. It requires you to be covered in soma, or like they speak about in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the anointed or the sacrificial butter. It's all over you. You know, it's not something that it's under your clothes. You know, it's under your garments. So that anointing, that's why you find in many indigenous systems, there's so many rituals that are done in the nude. Because, you know, I broke this down, whether it was last Thursday, last Friday, but, you know, your clothes are your habits, haberdashery, and that creates the space between you and what it is that you want to connect to. So we anoint you in the nude, you know, and we bring you to a place where you can understand the dark sayings and the dark wisdom. You can uncover the mysteries. But you have to be able to go to the source, and your eyes have to be cleaned from the connections of what you've personified as being earthly initiation, moving more into an esoteric and mystic understanding and view of the world. And you don't just slap that on one day because you change your name or because you tell people, well, you know, I'm just a real spiritual person. No. You're what real spiritual people call a clown. You know, you wouldn't even talk like that. You know, and that's what I really want a lot of you guys who are listening and appreciating this work to kind of think about and get out of. Your sainthood is going to be a reflection of your commitment. And your sainthood or your set apart is going to be set apart for your overall mission. It doesn't have to look like anybody else's. I mean, do you really want Ogun to look like Oshun? Is that what you really, when you go to the water, do you want him popping out of it? No, I really don't think you do. Most people don't want to see him, you know, let alone dancing in the water. You know, there is a separation. Like I said, when it comes from the source, there is a shooting out of rays. And that shooting out of rays expresses itself into various traditions and into various paths, but those paths lead to the source as long as that's your goal. But you got to understand that the paths are always going to start with complexity, and the complexity is where you wean out people who are serious from people who are not. Some people don't want to do all the rituals. They want to do all. They want to. I just want to sit here. I don't like doing readings. I just like to sit here and meditate and think about what comes to me, and it just comes to me. Yeah, you want the simple way, but you don't have that yet. You may hear me say that, but that's because I went through the hard stuff. And everybody has to go through the complex stuff. Everybody. I don't care how talented you are. It just means you'll go through it faster or slower, but there's a path to this. And those individuals we consider saints or Orisha, those are energies that have walked the path for so long that the path has become their home. And you got to understand that if you don't approach that understanding in the right way, then you'll be devoured by that God or by your gods. You talk about the lake of fire. I don't want to get too much in this, but imagine if a quote unquote God, imagine if a Ganju swallowed you whole and you went down into a Ganju's digestive system. It'd be what? A lake of acid, your stomach, or like a lake of fire, swallowed whole by your God. That's what the relationship will turn into if you approach these traditions as a coward and are unwilling to go through the work. If you're so quick to just accept things blindly and to go into a space of divine, what you consider to be divine faith, which is really just blind faith, then those same gods that you're accepting so quickly and so easily because it's easy to you will devour you. Because let's say if I'm a person who is all about eating and consuming, and then I transition, what kind of God do you think I'm gonna be? I'm just gonna want to eat all the time. Yeah, bring me some more rum. Yeah, bring me some chicken. I want chicken. Bring me some goat. I would like some goat and some oxtails. I'm just gonna keep, every time you divine, that's all it's gonna be. Because that was the world and the personality I created for myself in the heavenly realm. And then eventually what happens is I'm gonna want to devour you. It happens every time, I'm telling you. Gotta be careful what you pray to. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it's good just because it's old. And just because it's dead doesn't mean it's good. Or it died doesn't mean it's good. As above, so below. I spoke about that in my book, Grasping the Root of Divine Power, the difference between a dead person and an ancestor. Or it's like the difference between an old person and an elder. It's because someone's old doesn't make them an elder. You have to look at what the consistency has been. And that consistency will then outline what the next world will look like. So look at that in your own activities. If you're a person who goes to work every day, you hate your job, you're miserable half the time, and the only solace you get is Saturday night, because you sleep most of Saturday day because you're trying to recover from the strong. Sunday you're stressed because I gotta go back to the place tomorrow. So you just get a brief moment Saturday evening where you could be yourself. What do you think you're gonna be when you transition? You better get that stuff as the by and by out of your head. Oh, we suffer now, and then later on it's gonna be nice. No, later on you're gonna suffer. You're going to be one of those miserable spirits that people are always shooing out of their house with salt and creosol and sage. Nobody's going to want you around. As below, so above. As above, so below. So it's the activities and the commitments which create the habits that you form now that will determine what the afterlife also looks like. You can create an eternal ray of what it is that you are that you don't like, or you can create an eternal ray and cycle and tumbling of the greatest and most desirable and highest ideas that you can currently contain within you. It's up to you. You can be whatever kind of God you be when you die, but you can be a God. People will pray to you. You can visit people and ask for offerings and stuff like that. You could be one who tries to sleep with people and stuff and take their energy. You could be one of those. It's possible, because people are really confused about what this God thing is. So they're willing to accept anything at this point as a God. Any feeling, they say, "Oh, that was God. You felt that? That was God." Could have been anything. So just give that some thought. As we're dealing with Santeria, we're dealing with saints, the true nature of sainthood. It's not always a good thing, just because someone says that. Being set apart, being sanctified is important. If you're going to live this culture, you got to live it. And you can't always look to trying to figure out how to incorporate your culture into the world. It should be the other way around. The world should accommodate you. You should be flooding the world with light to the point that they have to now figure out how to accommodate you, not the other way around. Because if you're moving and evolving at that level and at that place, trust me, when you get to the next place, the next realm, you're going to be that same thing. And that even helps you with your lucid dreaming. I know that's the part that most people are going to write down. Oh, that helps lucid dreaming. Don't pick the little points, the little stuff. You got to listen to everything. But the key is to keep the highest aspects of what you are through worlds, even when you're dreaming. The only way to do that is through consistency. You can't turn on the act here and there once in a while when you're around certain people. It's not going to work that way. All right. So that's been our Foundational Friday. And make sure you tune in this Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for Chief Speaks. The call-in number is 347-945-7680. We'll be broadcasting on Blog Talk Radio, YouTube, as well as High Frequency Radio. All right, so you can call in with your testimonies, which that's what I enjoy the most, and your responsible questions. All right, so I am Chief Yuya. We have been speaking about Santeria, believe it or not, and I'll be back this Sunday. Thank you all for listening, and until such time, Hotep Po.